Hello, friends of Binge O'Clock. I wanted to let everybody know this next episode was Danielle and I guest starring on Nella's podcast, the Apocalist Book Club, where we watched 2 zombie movies and had a blast. This is part 1, and part 2 will release next week. And then after that, we'll be getting into Kipo and the Age of the Wonder Beasts. And we really hope you join us. Thank you so much. Enjoy the show.
And there's no one at all under the stars, the sun, the moon. And my heart's been set afire. I burned it all because of you.
Welcome to the Apocalist Book Club. I'm Nella, and I have taken over the podcast during our season hiatus while we prepare for season 2, and I don't even know what I'm doing. What I'm doing is all the things I can't do with Raven because she doesn't quite like them, which mainly means zombies. This is my zombie takeover of the podcast. You're welcome.
Yes, the zombies are at the radio studio door.
Zombie invasion.
Thank you, Raven, for letting me do this during our break. I appreciate you. But I am not here alone. I have trapped 2 people in here with me. And if you will please introduce yourselves.
Hi, listeners of the Apocalypse. I'm Joy.
And I'm Danielle.
And we host a little podcast called Binge O'Clock, where we watch things and then we talk about them. And it's kind of like if you're at a party and some friends are talking about a show that they love to watch, and then you listen in on the conversation, and that's it. That's the pitch. Nella was kind enough to join us for our Fringe season, and so turnabout's fair play. And here we are to talk about zombies.
Yes, you made me watch all 5 seasons of Fringe, and so now you have to watch zombie stuff with me. You're welcome. Thank you.
I'll take it.
I appreciate you. So this is my little treat. I'm so excited to finally being able to do this because longtime listeners of the Apocalypse know that Raven's not keen on zombie stuff. And I love zombie stuff. And so far in the books we've read, well, we've had an apocalypse where humans couldn't die. We haven't really seen the kind of zombie apocalypse that we get in Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, which are the 2 movies we decided to watch for this movie night of the book club. Just to start it off right, Joy, Danielle, would you recommend either or both or neither of these movies? I know it's a trick question. Of course you'd recommend them. They're great.
Of course I would. Well, Night of the Living Dead is just such a classic. I would recommend it to anybody. It definitely has its place in time. It makes a very clear statement in the light of day of modern circumstances, but it basically gave birth to the modern zombie film. So I think anybody who loves zombies should watch Night of the Living Dead. The other one is more complicated.
I think that I'm with you on this. I would say hands down, watch Night of the Living Dead. Absolutely. Unless you don't like zombies and then don't watch it. Right?
Right.
But
well,
Dawn of the Dead, I don't want to get too far into it now because I know we're saving this for later, but the movie started out one way and became something very different, and I was not prepared for the acts 2 and 3 of that movie.
I do wonder if part of it is because we did watch both movies back to back. And I think you need like the decade-long break in between the 2 to be like, oh, that's what we're doing. Because one is so serious and the other is so campy. But they're both really good. And they're really good at, even though the first one in particular wasn't really trying to make a statement.
It made a statement by accident, which is why I love it even
both
more.
Both of them make statements, and I really enjoy that. So that's why I 10/10 would recommend. But before we get too into the movies themselves, this is the part of the podcast where I give you some context.
Listeners, Nella did so much research, and I'm so proud of her.
I have 20 pages of research.
That's amazing.
I will try not to be here all night. I had a realization as I was researching this that, You know how our friend, the Maven of the Eventide, has her YouTube channel about vampires? I'm like, oh God, do I need to make one about zombies? Because I have so much to say and talk about zombies. It's kind of ridiculous.
Maybe you could drop some of that into a Nella Explains a Thing, you know? Like,
I have no idea. I promise nothing. I still am trying to get a video out about octagon houses, so here we are. Yeah, octagon houses, by the way, are that weird 1850s trend that everyone was doing, and it was weird. It was really weird. What a weird trend that was. Anyway, moving on.
I had a feeling you wouldn't be able to just casually mention that
Absolutely not.
mapping it for the listeners.
Nope. I have no impulse control when it comes to my own podcast. Like I said, I'm not trapped in here with you. You're trapped in here with me. So, of course, whenever we talk about modern zombies and modern cinema, you always have to sort of contextualize it. Even when Romero was making Night of the Living Dead in 1968, he understood zombies not as what they would become after his movie, but instead as the undead Haitian slaves depicted in the 1932 Bela Lugosi horror film White Zombie, which is a quote from the tragic forgotten history of zombies. Even in the original script for Night of the Living Dead, none of the flesh-eating monsters are described as zombies. They are all ghouls. That's what they're talked about and described as.
Is that where it comes that, like, we never say the Z word? Like, no zombie movie ever refers to its zombies as zombies?
I mean, that's a good question. I have no idea. I do think that no, we can't say the Z word thing just comes out of like just a weird pushback against like, would we really call them zombies in real life? And like, that's why I like books like Feed or the World War Z, where they just admit, no, if this happened, we would be like, oh yeah, zombies.
Zombies. There's a shorthand for that.
Yeah. And even those two books, and they're two fiction books, but even those two books live in a universe where these movies exist.
Right.
And the zombies within those universes are these type of shambling zombies. Mm-hmm. So that's, that's what I enjoy about it. I think when you get into movies where it's like the fast zombies and the really aggressive zombies, I feel like that's when they shy away from the zombie word because it's like, no, we're trying to be something different and new and exciting and dangerous. And I'm like, just call them zombies.
Right.
Like, you're not doing it because you're trying to distance yourself from the whitewashing of the actual racial history of the zombie folklore. You're doing it because you want to be hip and cool.
Well, like, if only that was the reason why, but it's not.
No,
okay,
it's
wait.
not.
So in the original text, the word zombie was used, or no, it wasn't?
No, it was not used. They were called ghouls. Now, in the second movie, Dawn of the Dead, that's where they start using zombie instead.
Do you know when the term came up, though? Like, were people talking about zombies during Night of the Living Dead, or was it just not even part of our lexicon?
Man, that is a great question that I do not have an answer to, because we had zombie in the vernacular. We had a ton of zombie movies, zombie horror movies, horror comedy movies before this point. The 1932 White Zombie, Bela Lugosi, who was famous for playing Dracula, plays a, voodoo practitioner who's white, who enslaves a bunch of people. And I'm kind of like, well, at least the bad guy was white, but I feel like we're not really coming across the moral of the story like we should be.
It's so close.
And unfortunately, in the 40s, and you're going to yikes with me on this, there are like zombie horror comedies like that have black characters in it. And the picture in your head of what a 1940s horror comedy with black people and zombies comes into your head, and it's as yikesy as it is in my head because of the 40s, then we're all on the same page on this one.
Yeah.
The few screen grabs and like snippets I've watched is just like, oh, yikes. Yikes with a side of fries. Truly. Really before, and I wouldn't even say even before Romero, because, right, you have Plan 9 from Outer Space, where the undead rising are not caused by some magic. It's caused, oh my god, do you know how the zombies in Plan 9 from Outer Space rise from the dead?
Nope.
Okay, long-distance electrode shot into the penile and pituitary glands of the recent dead.
Ah, the pituitary gland!
The good old pituitary.
It always comes back to the pituitary. Curse you, Fringe!
It followed you, Nella.
It followed me. I was not expecting that.
That's
I forgot
actually
that
very
that's
funny.
why the dead rise, and I forgot. Completely forgot. Yeah, even looking back on it, even like Last Man on Earth or Mega Man or even I Am Legend, even those stories, like, it's sort of a weird, are they vampires? Are they zombies? But they're not caused by magic. It's caused by some biological thing that happens that then infects all of humanity except for this one survivor. So we have these zombie stories, you know, that we can recognize now as, well, they are zombie stories, but they're not the genesis of the modern zombie movie, story, film, you name it. And it's interesting to me, like, why didn't those stick?
Well, because I'm coming in without the context, I think. I have seen literally nothing that you have just listed.
Sure.
Sure.
What
Yep.
seen or read? What sets those zombie stories apart from this zombie story?
I personally think, and I kind of agree with the article from The Atlantic about how America erased the tragic history of the zombie, that by whitewashing the origins of the zombie folklore, it turns the undead into a platform for escapist fantasy. And I think Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead and everything that came after it is escapist fantasy far more than anything that came before it. And that's why it hit a button in the mind of the public in general. Whereas, you know, you had zombie horror movies throughout the 30s, 40s, 50s, and there were international zombie movies. You know, there was a Mexican zombie movie. You know, it wasn't just an American thing that was happening. But when it becomes an escapist fantasy, when it hits that how long would you survive trigger in our brains, and when also the danger you're facing you don't have to feel any guilt against, I think that's why it's so appealing, and that's what we see created with Night of the Living Dead.
Okay.
And what gets carried forward.
And you have a antagonist with a voodoo zombie sort of piece, right?
Right? And that's what ties back into the folklore itself. Like, so actually, the folklore shifts, and this is really fascinating. From about the 1630s to before the Haitian Revolution, which was 1804, the zombie mythos was more about this belief that, and now mind you, it comes out of Haiti, which was a French colony known as Saint-Dominique at that time, and it was brutal. Your life expectancy as an enslaved person in that time, you were lucky if it was a couple of months in a lot of cases. So there was a constant influx of new people being stolen, being brought over to these absolutely horrific conditions. And a belief arose that dying would release them back to
Like a natural state.
Like the whole, like to an afterlife where they could be free. But what you see also within that is that suicide won't get you there. So by committing suicide, you're trapping your spirit in this terrible place, which a part of me is like, but where does that come from? Is that like Christianity trying to keep the enslaved people from committing suicide and building up this suicide as a sin, and then it gets incorporated into the Haitian belief at this period? Or was this also a belief? I was a little tricky finding the genesis of this, if this was something that did come from African tradition of that suicide is something that entraps your soul and keeps you from freedom in the afterlife, or if it was something that got incorporated as a way to like keep people from killing themselves.
A lot of that might be like a protected kind of thing where people just don't, you know, like nobody necessarily has no one kept those really good notes.
Well,
and I mean, I
would be curious to see.
Yeah, I only really know like the slightest snippet of voodoo, and it's unfortunate in like media that like voodoo is tended to be the more negative aspects of everything, and it's just like, well, that's not actually what it is.
Yeah. Well, that's why when you see that shift of the zombie folklore into that, no, it's actually caused by a voodoo practitioner. It happens after the Haitian Revolution, at the end of French colonialism in this country, but with the sanctions that were placed on this country and with the, unfortunately, the corruption that occurred and with the tyranny that occurred because of, and man, I could go on about this forever because like everything that you could stack against the Haitian people was stacked against them by like the entire world. 100%. Like they had to pay back reparations to France for their own freedom. Messed up.
Yep.
But that's why I think you see this shift into it's actually caused by somebody who is enslaving you, because I think it comes out of this fear that you can always fall back into slavery, that we have freed ourselves, but there is always a danger that somebody is going to come and get you, and you will be forced into your own body for the rest of eternity, unable to do anything but follow orders. And I think that that's like a huge psychic damage that the folklore really, really explores, that we then, of course, move away from. When we move away from, it's caused by a single practitioner or by a spell or by a magician or like, and then it moves into it came from space or it was a virus or it was spores, because then it shifts from the horror of one person's evil act enslaving you and other people versus the fear of a mass of just
like an environmental catalyst.
Right.
Yes.
A lab accident.
And when you think about like, the big bad monsters leading up to Night of the Living Dead, you have all the greatest hits of Dracula and Frankenstein and Wolfman, you have aliens, you have giant monsters, and you have all, in a way, I think when you look at like the monster horror leading up to Night of the Living Dead, there is this fear of the other. Monsters so often in this period get coded as people of color, 100%. And then you have Night of the Living Dead, where the danger coming for you is all white people. Shambling, awful, dead white people. And that shifts in Dawn of the Dead. They definitely diversified the background there.
Yep.
But in Night of the Living Dead, it is all white people.
Yep.
And I again, I'm not sure if they knew what they were saying with that, but they sure said something with that.
I feel like by the end of the movie, I mean, we'll get into it, but I know Romero wasn't initially thinking he was saying anything, and then sort of like after the movie was done, kind of woke up almost in a fever dream and was like, "Wait a second."
Yeah. But before we get back into the movies themselves, I just want to give a little background about George Romero himself, because we like to do that on this podcast. He was born in the Bronx in 1940. He died in Toronto 2017. At the time the movie came out, most critics trashed it, especially Night of the Living Dead. They described it as unrelieved sadism.
Oh.
That it cast serious aspersions on the integrity of the makers. But audiences loved it. I mean, even Roger Ebert, and I read his his review on it, and like he had some choice words that sure was the 60s. And he was so obsessed with kids saw this movie because no one warned them. And this was like a month before what we would consider like movie ratings really started taking into effect. So there wasn't really a warning on this movie of like, by the way, it might not be appropriate for children. But like, yeah, there was that in print, a backlash against it. Whereas like, oh man, audiences loved it. In fact, there's reports of drive-in operators had to take out newspaper ads to apologize for turning away so many customers.
Oh gosh, love that.
May we all have that kind of problem with our business. Like, I'm so sorry
Right?
you can't come to see this movie. We're full up. Come tomorrow night.
And Joy, as we were watching it, you made this point of like, you were wondering if Night of the Living Dead sort of had some sort of stake in how Vietnam was being depicted on TVs at that time. And I did sort of find quotes sort of unpacking that, Night of the Living Dead evoked Vietnam-era bloodshed, and with its black male lead trapped in a farmhouse, echoed some of the hysteria in the civil rights era. Dawn of the Dead poked fun at soul-deadening consumerism, and Day of the Dead, which we didn't watch, addressed ethics and science. So,
I can definitely see that.
yeah. And in 2013, Romero did say, I always use the zombie as a character for satire or a political criticism, and I find that's missing in what's happening now. Which, in 2013, I can see you, feeling a little bit that way. All right, you have your opinions, George. That's cool.
Definitely in 2013.
What I find really fascinating is that George actually did most of his work out of Pittsburgh. He actually did worked with Mr. Rogers.
Really?
He did a lot of commercial work.
Huh.
That's yes.
Those are not the words I expected you to say.
What did he and Mr. Rogers do together?
Just commercial work and other camera work and like that.
Like literal commercial.
Yeah, his company was doing commercial work throughout Pittsburgh.
Oh no.
And what he wanted the woman who was in Mr. Rogers to play Barbara.
Oh boy.
But then Mr. Rogers was like, no, I don't want you in a horror movie. So he had to find someone else.
That's great.
I mean, to be fair, that would be bad for brand.
Gotta be careful about that brand, but still, hilarious. Hilarious that, you're working out of Pittsburgh and you have to, make sure you're not stepping on Mr. Rogers' toes. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Rogers doesn't like that. Oh, okay. I understand.
Oh, okay. Right.
Dial it back, folks.
Dial it back. That is
pretty much
amazing. I'm shocked and amazed.
Well, on that note, I think we can get into, the first movie itself, Night of the Living Dead. That good 1968 action. So just as a rundown, the main characters in the movie are Ben, played by Dwayne Jones. We have Barbara, played by Judith O'Dea. Harry Cooper is played by Carl Hardman. He was actually one of the film's producers, and he also provided the voice for the newscaster heard on the radio in the car at the beginning of the movie. Helen Cooper was played by Marilyn Eastman. She also played a female ghoul who ate an insect.
Oh, I remember that ghoul.
Tom was played by Keith Wayne. Judy was played by Judith Ridley. And then Karen Cooper, the young girl, was Hardman's daughter in real life.
Oh my God.
She was 11 years old at the time. Her name was Kyra. And she also portrayed the mangled corpse on the house's upstairs floor that Ben drags away. Because she was small enough, they were like, we'll just do her up and drag her off screen.
She killed it. She did a great job.
Right? And what's hilarious is this woman, so a school teacher now, and she talks about oh yeah, I loved horror as a kid. It was so great being able to be the monster. But the one thing she doesn't like, or that she had difficulty watching as a kid, was the scene where her father, ends up dying, and she was like, that was a little, I always struggle with watching that because I didn't want to watch my dad die.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
No one's gonna argue with that statement.
Yes.
And it's eternally on celluloid too,
I know. And then a fun fact is that Bill Chilly Billy Cardile played himself, and Chilly Billy was well known in Pittsburgh as a TV presenter who hosted a horror film anthology series called Chiller Theater. And so he plays himself in the movie, which I find hilarious.
Which one was he again? Wait.
I want to say he was on the TV as a news reporter, but now I'm not so sure. So they had to do their own fundraising for this movie. It was 6 of them doing the fundraising, and they were able to raise approximately $114,000 for the budget in that time's money.
Right.
Not for inflation now. And it earned between 12 and 15 million in the U.S., ended up grossing 30 million internationally. So good job, everyone.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
I find this hilarious because, this is kind of a serious horror thing, right? It's suspenseful, it's creepy. Do you know what the original concept of this movie was when they were sitting around shooting the swear jar?
Tell me.
So the first concept, and this is from the behind the scenes book. So this is interviews with cast and crew and writers and things like that. So the first concept that we all liked, as the quote goes, was about monsters from outer space, only was going to be a horror comedy instead of a horror drama of some teenagers hot rodding around the galaxies were gonna get involved with teenagers from Earth, befriending them while cartoon-like authority figures stumbled around trying to unearth clues to the crazy goings-on. The outer space teenagers were gonna have a weird, funny pet called the Mess.
Oh my
a live garbage disposal that looked like a clump of spaghetti. You just tossed empty pop cans, popsicle sticks, or whatever into the mess and it ate them. There was also going to be a wacky sheriff called Sheriff Suck, who was totally inept and kept being the butt of all the teenagers' jokes. I don't know how we went from that to
where we landed, to what actually happened. I just love that everything you just said sounds so much more 60s than what we watched. Every single thing.
And do you know why the reason they didn't go ahead with this initial plan?
What is
Too
it?
much?
They couldn't figure out the budget for all the wacky sci-fi nonsense they wanted to depict.
I mean, listen,
They didn't have enough money for the practical effects.
that's a
sounds
perfectly
like
rational
money.
reason for that movie not to be made in the 60s. I would like to kindly ask the universe to make that movie now. I would totally watch this movie.
I would also.
So
watch this
then, scraping that idea, they decided to try a different, darker angle. And with this idea, it was a little more based in like Forbidden Planet and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And the second idea was that a boy ran away from home, following a fight with his brother, and then he would be like in the woods where he would discover large panes of glass covering rotting bodies, and that ghoulish people or alien creatures would be feeding off the human corpses. Ooh. And but then, and I love this, they ended up going with the story they came up with because George Romero wrote a 40-page sort of short story that even he admits was basically ripped off from I Am Legend.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's what they ended up going with.
I mean, look, he knows his strengths and he knows his weaknesses.
I know. And so that's how we got the movie we have. Boy, it's already such a journey and we haven't even gotten into the movie itself.
I know. Oh, but I love I love both those ideas. I would love to see that at some point.
Right?
Oh, man.
I feel like the second idea would make a really good horror short.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one would just be I almost want it to be like an animated movie.
Ooh, that's a great idea.
I feel like you have to. I mean, of course, you just blew the budget again out of the water, but I feel like it would have to with all the hijinks.
Right? I mean, you have a character called the Mess, and it looks like the spaghetti pasta monster. Like, it needs to be an animated movie.
Yeah.
They just didn't know it yet.
The animation wasn't there yet.
Yeah, but that's okay. We have it. We have it
the
now.
technology.
Mm-hmm. So there you go, universe. You're welcome. Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, trying to summarize. I think this movie's going to be easier than Dawn of the Dead.
Certainly.
We open on Johnny and Barbara, two siblings, who make the fatal mistake of turning off the radio at the start of the apocalypse.
Yep.
As they are driving to put a wreath on the grave of their father. And they do this once a year because their mother asks it. Barbara takes it more seriously. Johnny is just like done. Mm-hmm. It's like, what, a 5-hour drive?
Yeah, it's like a 5 or 6 hour
back.
drive. Yeah.
Something nuts. Like, I'm just like, there's got to be something you can do in the interim so you're not wasting a whole day doing this.
Like, you would think you would have found a diner by now that you always stop at, or like a motel that it's, you know, make a night of it.
Right. Order a special piece of pie. Instead, what we get is 5 hours of complaining about daylight savings.
Yes. Which I loved. I personally appreciated a lot. But then again, if I was stuck in a car for 5 hours with my brother, this would probably be the same energy, if I'm being honest. And while they're in the graveyard, Johnny, who is he looks like a real white collar nerd, is being a little brat, and he's just not taking this seriously at all, and he's going on and on about like, oh, you know, their grandfather used to say some pretty bad stuff about me, about how the devil would take me or whatever. And I don't know, you kind of seem like a brat, Johnny, so that seems like on par. We get the iconic line, "They're coming to get you, Barbara."
Yes.
And as he's teasing his sister, we see a kind of shambling figure in the distance, which we assume is the groundskeeper, but surprise, it's not. And this figure grabs Barbara, and Johnny tries to protect his sister, and then Johnny ends up knocked over, bashing his head against a tombstone, so implying that Johnny's not gonna get back up, at least not the Johnny we know.
Nope.
And Barbara, having lost a shoe, makes a run for it. She tosses out the other shoe, which good on you, Barbara. Very well done.
Yeah.
She hops in the car, doesn't have the key, but she's able to put it into drive so that it can roll down the hill. Also good on you. Ends up hitting a car because, again, pretty sure we didn't have power steering in the 60s like, we have nowadays. So she kind of just scrapes up against a car to get out. And we have like 3 minutes of her running and falling and running and all these crazy camera angles just building up this like drama and panic and anxiety.
I really love the zombie attacking her in the car. Like,
yeah,
the zombie gets close enough to like really make it seem like it's going to rip her out of the car. Or it's going to, like she's not going to survive the opening. And for a while there, it is kind of touch and go. You don't know if she's going to get out of there. I love it.
And then we have, I think, the thing when I first saw it, I was not expecting, having been so aware of other zombie properties before I saw, like, this movie. The zombie picks up a rock.
Yes.
And bashes in the window of the car.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that is scarier than fast zombies. It uses tools.
It can
A zombie
use
that
tools.
uses tools. Oh, terrifying.
No. It has problem solving. How is that not terrifying?
No, a zombie using tools will beat a fast zombie any day in my mind. It just, nope, right out of there.
Oh, I hate it. We're used to the shamblers and it just being a matter of like mass and like the push of their bodies, but like, he picked up a rock.
I know.
No,
or like
thank
the
you.
zombies
Nope,
that'll
nope,
run
nope.
into a wall and then just keep on running into the wall over and over again, even though there's a ladder right over there. That's the kind of zombie I want.
Yeah. This is the zombie you wish you had chasing you, because that zombie eventually will chase itself out. Something will go wrong. It'll lose a leg because it was doing it too fast and it doesn't have any pain receptors anymore. The zombies who understand tools are horrifying.
Right?
But we do finally end up at the farmhouse.
Yes.
Which appears to be abandoned. But then we have the horror as Barbara goes upstairs of finding a very, very decayed body, possibly eaten body, the eyes staring.
Yeah, I mean, that
With the-
zombie definitely didn't really have skin on its face.
Yeah.
Nope.
That was a face-eaten zombie.
Face-eaten zombie. Ugh. The practical
Girl,
effects of that
somebody
scene
ate
were
your face.
great.
Yeah. No, such good makeup happening on that bit. And that's when we meet the real MVP, our hero, Ben.
Ben! Ben with a tire iron. Thank goodness
What?
for Ben.
The story goes that they had another idea for Ben in mind. They didn't write Ben as a black character, but then Jones read for the part and he was it. They wanted him.
Yep.
Which is kind of wild to me because Ben was going to be a crude talking and rough but resourceful trucker originally. Right?
Which is so completely not what we got.
Also,
No.
they originally figured he would be played by a guy named Rudy Ritchie, who does end up in Dawn of the Dead as one of the motorcycle raiders, by the way.
Interesting.
So, like, imagine that dynamic of, like, this rough and tumble trucker. What I find fascinating is that in the behind the scenes book, Jones actually changed a lot of the dialogue on set to elevate the character. Because the character was written as a stereotype. So, like, I'm just going to read a brief comparison. So, when we first meet Ben, what was first in the script, and there's, like, only one original script left, the only existing copy known. And originally, the lines were, "Don't you mind the creep outside. I can handle him. There's probably going to be lots more of them. Soon they find out about us. I'm out of gas. Them pumps over there is locked. Is there food here? Get us some grub. Then we beat him off and skedaddle. I guess you putz with the phone.
Wow,
And
I
then-
can already hear the difference. Damn.
Yes, and then what Dwayne says is, don't worry about him. I can handle him. Probably be a whole lot more than when they find out about us. The truck is out of gas. The pump out here is locked. Is there a key? We can try to get out of here if we get some gas. Is there a key? And then he tries the phone. Suppose you've tried this. I'll see if I can find some food. And that's the changes that actor made to the character. He changed the dialogue so that he wouldn't sound like a stereotype, and it's so much better.
Yeah.
But again, he was written as a white, like, low-class stereotype.
Yeah.
But boy, would it have been bad if those words were coming out of
No, it would have hit
Ben
different.
Scott's mouth.
It would have hit
It
different.
would have hurt so bad.
Oh, it would have hit very
Yeah.
different.
I'm glad the dialogue's changed.
But then there were other issues where Jones didn't want to hit Barbara. I think in the original script, like, the white Ben hit Barbara like 3 times.
Oh.
And Jones was like, no.
You mean
I don't even want to hit her once.
that kind of like slapped some sense into them kind of hit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be
And-
fair, in the late 60s, I feel like a lot of men were hitting a lot of women to snap some
But
sense
not black
into them.
men. Not black men and not white women.
No, not black men. And also, actually, not to pause the rundown, but if I can recommend, there's a really good sort of semi-documentary style piece on Amazon Prime right now. Oh, actually, I think it's with a Shudder subscription, but I highly recommend it if you're a horror fan. Do it. Called Horror Noir, and it's a bunch of Black professionals, either actors or producers or directors, talking about the Black horror movie genre and how it's evolved since what we were talking about, since the 1930s and 40s. And it's a fascinating watch, and I highly recommend it. But like, that was one of the first places that really gave me the, oh, right, because outside of this, we had a bunch of stuff where it was like, you have to fear the black man coming to kidnap the white woman. You know, that was the trope. That was the, coming to steal your women. And like, Ben wasn't like that. Ben was just a dude trying to survive the apocalypse like everyone else.
Yes.
And it was
Extremely
because
down to business.
And it was because he was written as a white man. Because Romero makes the point of, once we cast him, I made the conscious decision not to rewrite the character to be black.
Right.
Jones himself, though, talks to, even when they were filming, had a little bit of pushback on that because, and Romero admits it, Jones had a much better idea of how transgressive this was. Of course he did, because he's like, hello, I have a much better idea of how transgressive this is. I read a really interesting article called Guess Who's Going to Be Dinner, comparing the roles that Sidney Poitier was playing at that same time versus Jones and the character of Ben we see, which was such a departure, where Sidney's characters were very, like, they were very exact and they were very palpable to white audiences, and he was never allowed to be angry. Like, his characters were never angry. And that the one time his character hits someone is after this movie. Interestingly enough. Sidney had a film persona that demonstrated a reason and self-control. He could temper his individualistic impulses for the greater, white good. Whereas with Ben, you get someone who is that type of hero. He's dressed in a button-down white shirt. There's almost like a Obama-like quality to him in a lot of ways when I watch it now. But he's allowed to get angry.
Right.
He's allowed to say, you're the boss down there, but I'm the boss up here.
Yeah.
He is looking out to save himself and anyone else that's willing to come along with him. There is some discussion about, we're in this period in the late 60s where you're seeing the rise of black militancy. You see the rise of the Black Panthers. You see this idea of, we're tired of being respectable. We're angry, and we will punch back.
Yeah.
If so help us, we will. because you've given us no other option. And I think that's really, really interesting. But then also, like, it wasn't a conscious choice to have Ben be that. He was that just because they didn't rewrite it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
exactly.
also,
And because he was given the leeway to rewrite the role in a way that made sense for him, right?
Yeah. Where at least the language was elevated. But the actions he takes, the anger the character has, still comes out of that lower class white guy who's a trucker.
The amount of agency that he has in this role. And what I really like about his anger is that he does get angry and he's allowed to have emotions, but it doesn't go the way of what you were saying earlier, where he's slapping Barbara across the face every 7 minutes, you know? Instead, you know, if Barbara's catatonic and sitting in a corner, Ben doesn't care. Ben is boarding up the windows. If Barbara has finally gotten up and looks like she can do a thing, you know what? Here's a box of nails. Please find some.
Another thing I was exploring as I was researching this was, as we were watching horror noir, Jordan Peele has this great point of, you know, when you're watching this movie, is this white woman more afraid of the zombies or is she more afraid of the black guy? You know, and there's been some debate about this. Is Barbara being played as a racist, a white woman who has that initial, like, knee-jerk racist reaction of, and now I'm alone in a house with a black guy? And there is some debate that she was written to be afraid of all men, actually.
I mean, I could see that.
Because you have the moment in the graveyard where the guy's approaching her and she's like, she's drawing herself in. She's trying to skirt around him. She's trying to make herself small. She is terrified of Ben in the moment. But then when the two white guys burst out of the basement, she screams and she flinches away from them. And then also when you come down to the stunning conclusion where she is literally ripped apart by grasping white men, including her brother, it's like, it feels a bit on the nose.
Feels a bit on the nose. You're right. I think the only character she really talks to is one of the women.
Yeah. The only people she really opens up to are the women who try to take care of her. And I think there's a lot to be said about, I don't think the text itself was saying, aha, like, this is a secret racism that all white women have. Actually, we can't help but see it and read it on the screen because that's what we are culturally expecting of a scene like that, because we know what happens. We know what has happened throughout history. White women tend to point the finger towards the black men, and that's what we read into it. Textually, it's not there. But because of the casting and because of our own messed up country's history, you can't not see it that way.
there is no other way to read that situation. I find the character of Barbara to be fascinating in that she's sort of allowed to be in shock, you know? And I think that is a really interesting choice for something that's like a zombie apocalypse film. You know, like people always need to be useful in a zombie apocalypse. You know, like everyone has a, you know, you look at something like The Walking Dead or any of those other pieces, like everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. But you never see a character just go fully catatonic and like, nope, I'm going to check out now for like 3 hours. Okay, bye.
I think as the viewer, you kind of have to like shove down that knee jerk, like, oh, she's being so useless. Why won't she snap out of it? Because the actress Odeya very clearly is quoted as saying, I believe Barbara exemplifies honesty. How she got through her horror ordeal is probably the way many real people would. When the zombies were breaking into the house, she snapped back into reality. It was time to fight back. And she did until her death. If Barbara is remembered for her honest behavior in the evolution of women in horror, then I'll be thrilled.
Yeah.
And I think there is a big truth to that. We're not all going to have our wits about us in the moment. And this is, it's easy to forget that this has one night. Now we see zombie movies and zombie materials that are whole seasons.
Right.
And people are constantly dealing with the zombie threat instead of, you're hunkering down for one night and it's a question of, do you stay or do you go? Like,
It's very,
do you even
like,
have the time to process what's happened to you?
Classics, like like a real classic play storyline of like the Grecian myths of like they all take place in 24 hours, you know?
Yeah.
a very specific kind of storytelling, which I do really like. And I think she played that character really well. I think when I was younger, I probably interpreted her character like that, of like, why isn't she doing anything? But then again, when I was younger, I had a lot of other zombie things where it's like, yeah, everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. Everybody gets up and goes. And why is she just sitting there?
I mean, look, I was sitting there watching this movie again and being like, why are you all hanging on the first floor? Go to the second floor. Like, rip up the staircase behind you. Throw some big furniture down. Like, you can go out a window. Like, look, we're always going to watch any horror movie, but especially zombie movies, and be like, well, that's what you did wrong. And I think that's a real testament to apocalyptic fiction in general, not just zombie fiction. I've been reading apocalyptic fiction since, like, 1807 on this podcast. Yes, I'm an immortal.
Up to the 40s these days?
We're about to hit the 40s because we ended at 36. You know, so many of the apocalypse movies we've read hinge on the one mistake you make, the one choice you make. And like, we're finally really starting to see that in the Apocalist book we've written, because there was a brief period where it's just like, oh, the world ended, but don't worry, we can solve everything. Like the Allen syndrome of like, you have the one guy who has the answer to everything, and don't you worry, we'll just restart the Earth's population. Whereas finally, in our stories, we're finally starting to see novels where it's people trying to survive, but instead of succeeding there, they actually fail in the end, which I really think we're going to see a lot more of as we get past the end of World War II into the atomic age for reals. And I think this is really something we see in zombie storylines itself, because it comes out of that in an apocalyptic scenario. You have an end date. You're not going to last forever. You can only run so fast before you take a misstep, and then it's over.
Mm-hmm. I interrupted, though. We were talking about Barbara and Ben, who are boarding up the house.
Yes, well, Ben's doing all the boarding up.
Yes.
Barbara is blue screen of death. She's, you know.
She tries. She gently holds up a board at one point.
She does. And, she gives it an effort.
We do have a scene where, guess what? We find out why the woman's face was eaten off upstairs. There's a zombie in the house. Ben's able to dispatch of it, though, and then he sets the body on fire because good news, everyone. Zombies are afraid of fire. And that's where we get Ben's story of how we got here, about how he learned they were afraid of fire. And again, we come back to all the zombies outside, from what we can see, are white. Mm-hmm. And there's a real sense that Ben is just passing through and he got stuck here.
Because he ran out of gas. Oh,
he ran out of gas. Of all the luck. Poor Ben.
Of all the towns to break down in.
And in the finest of Resident Evil 2 traditions, there was a gas truck, and then it hits something and explodes. Mm-hmm. And then all the zombies are like, no, fire.
And Ben is like, no, gas.
You know, and Ben's like telling the story as like, I'm trying to connect with this person I'm stuck in this house with. And Barbara, though, is still like disassociated, really, very deeply disassociated. And she's telling her own story about what happened to her and Johnny, but in a very distant.
Well, she's in shock,
and she's in shock.
She's
I know, exactly
firmly in shock.
Yeah, and Ben, unfortunately, gets annoyed by this, but Ben's only human too.
Yeah, and know, she was getting increasingly panicked, increasingly agitated, and I think when he finally snapped, it's when she was going to go and she was going to leave the house, is what she wanted to do. Leave the house and find Johnny.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And she slaps him. Mm-hmm. And so he hits her back.
Mm.
Yeah.
Which, it's a pretty solid slaps all around. It's
yeah.
And Jones fought so hard against this, and they were like, look, we need an in-movie reason why she is passed out.
Couldn't the in-movie reason just be panic, fear, shock, any of the above? Come on.
Look, we can't go back in time and be like, can't she just be like, do the woman thing of, the vapors, and then she passes out?
Yeah.
We could have had the vapors. But then we wouldn't have been, hitting a white woman.
I'm sure that Ben negotiated down from like 6 slaps to 1. So
it was supposed to be 3. It was supposed to be 3, and he was like, it's going to be 1. if it's got to be anything, it'll be one and one alone.
Yeah, I do. I don't know. I get the impression that like he regrets it as soon as he does it. Like, I feel like Jones is able to play it off where it's just like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. I believe that it comes off as this was a knee-jerk reaction. Wow, do I have regrets? But at least now she's not going to leave the house. Great,
Yeah.
Like, he's not super happy with it. It's not like he's celebrating that now she's knocked out.
No, I think Jones was, God, like he was actually like, he was like studying at NYU for like his MA. He had like was doing all this stuff. He ended up actually teaching at NYU for years. I know there's a funny story of him like going to the diner that used to be around the corner from the Waverly, and they were playing Night of the Living Dead, and his students were just like, yeah, who was that guy that was in that? And he's like, oh my God, it's me. But he was like, no, I'm not, no. And one of them was like, wasn't it you? And he's like, no, we're not doing
You
this
don't
here.
have the internet. You can't look it up.
Oh man. To be him as a professor at NYU with all those dudes who definitely thought they were smarter than him. It'd just be like, nope, we're not playing this game.
After this has happened, Ben is still trying to be the hero you want in the zombie apocalypse. He is boarding everything up. He is taking stock of his supplies. He's listening to the radio, and we've determined this is a national emergency. This isn't a local phenomenon. Mm-hmm. There's the repeating about how the victims are being eaten.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
I wish they say that so many times.
Oh boy! And this is when we find the rest of our cast as two white guys come running up the stairs.
Classic.
And I love Ben reading them the riot act of them trying to explain why they were hiding down the cellar, and Ben being like, didn't you hear people up here?
Yeah,
like,
because they've been in
why
the
didn't
cellar
you come to help? You heard a
whole
woman
time.
scream. You heard a woman scream. And then the perfect line of, it would be nice if you got your story straight, man. Ben is so good.
Ben is the best. Call him on it. Call him on all of it.
And Tom, the younger guy, he's sheepish about it. He knows what they did. Like, meanwhile, Harry Cooper, he's blustering all over the place. He's right. He's an old white man, and he is right. And what he's doing is right. And what he's doing is making sure everyone hides in the cellar barricaded down there.
Right. And listen, I have the benefit of having seen this movie for the first time as an adult, so there was no part of me that was annoyed at Barbara in this movie. Mr. Cooper is who I could not stand. Mr. Cooper.
Worst.
Yeah, no, Mr. Cooper is definitely the antagonist of this film. Like, you think it's the zombies. No, it's Mr. Cooper.
I know a lot of people will talk about what annoys them about zombie properties is, no, the humans were the bad thing the whole time. But that's what I like about zombie anything, because the zombies are just the inciting incident. It could be a hurricane. It could be a tornado. It could be a flash flood. The real story is, what do you do in the face of your impending doom?
Exactly.
And how do you react against it?
Well, exactly. And a compelling conflict is not these bunch of reanimated corpses are after us. That's not compelling. Because except for the fast ones, most zombies you can usually outrun and like get far enough away from to at least, sleep for a day or two. I don't know. And then find other cover. Like you need that human conflict to make the story interesting. And this is another reason why I really love that they cast Ben as a black man, because having that play off of Cooper was so great. Like, it just added this additional level of, like, this white dude just thinks he knows what's going on, and it's like, what if you just listen to the black guy?
By the way, what he would like to do is for everyone to barricade themselves in the cellar with keywords here, his kid who has been bitten by a zombie.
Yep. Now, we don't know at this point that zombie bites transmit, but we know. Okay, but like if this was 1968, we wouldn't know. We would have
know.
no idea.
I think you're right.
that-
It's just
I
like
think,
watching it.
The best case scenario. Okay, so here's the thing about his kid. The best case scenario is that his kid doesn't die from this bite, right? Because we definitely know in the story of this movie by that point that it is reanimated corpses, that everyone who is dying is literally coming back to life. So it doesn't even matter that she's been bit.
It's not the infection through the bite. It's that the bite itself, the injury, is killing her.
Yes, which that in and of itself is different than some other more modern zombie flicks, because there's a lot of stuff, it depends on where the zombie apocalypse came from, of where, some of them have this vampirism thing where it's like a zombie has to bite you to make another zombie, blah, blah, blah. But like,
I mean, what we find out in the television broadcast when we finally get to the point where they break out the TV is that they're pretty sure it's radiation from space.
Spoilers. Space.
Who had radiation? Radiation on your bingo card. Check it off on the zombie apocalypse. We did it, everyone.
I like that you're covering. You've had a radiation apocalypse.
Oh, yeah, we've had a radiation apocalypse. Yeah.
I was going to say, it was like, we're jumping a couple of decades for
please, no, radiation from space, that's old hat in the Apocalypse game.
Fine. It's fine.
I mean, like, we've had 2 deluges from space.
Oh, that's right.
We've had 2 deluges, and then radiation.
About the deluges.
Anyway, but here we get that classic debate of, is it better to hunker down, or is it better to have an escape plan? An escape plan to where is a little trickier because, again, the truck is out of gas and technically there's a gas pump, but do we have a key? Can we get to it in time? And do we keep moving? And I think this sets up the fundamental question of like a myriad of zombie material afterwards. 100%, like so many zombie apocalypse.
Do you go up the stairs? Do you go down the stairs? Do you? Yeah.
Exactly. Do you go up the stairs and rip up all the boards behind you and throw things down? And like I would, yes. That's my own opinion.
Do you try to get into the truck with the gas because the truck is how Ben got there in the first place, and the truck allowed him to mow down 50 zombies?
Do we have to talk about
that was like a good old-fashioned Ford pickup. Like that thing won't stop until the gas runs out. You
Absolutely
can mow down
not.
so many zombies that thing. I should know. That's my tool of choice when I play State of Decay 2.
There it is. I was wondering how long
wanna-
it would take us before we talked about State of Decay 2. Dear listeners, that was a little over an hour into recording. There it was.
I don't want to jump all the way to the end of the movie, so I won't give it all away yet. But the end of the movie wouldn't have happened if they had been able to get into the truck and get away, right?
No, of course not.
Oh, goodness gracious, that truck. Anyway, we're sort of skipping ahead. There's conflict to brewing. Whose plan are we going to go with? I personally like, what was his name? Tommy?
Oh, yeah. Tom and Judy are the couple.
Tom sort of plays mediator. I appreciate that Judy is just kind of not a flower child, but definitely like a first generation feminist who's just like, I'm just done with these people. Can I just like sit in a corner and not? I would just like to not
Have a smoke. Yeah.
Just have a smoke. Maybe talk to this other woman. She seems like she's having a hard time. But like Tommy like genuinely tries to play mediator between these two sides of the coin. And I'm pretty sure it's Tommy that comes up with the like, well, doesn't it make sense that we defend up here first, and then if they overtake us, we go down into the cellar? Which a cellar on a farm, I mean, I guess it depends on the farm and what it's made of, but that does feel like somewhat of a bunker situation. Like you could probably defend your position, but you are trapped in a hole in the ground.
I am shocked that it doesn't have a root cellar entrance from the outside.
See?
Shocked,
I was
you.
as well.
What kind of farmhouse is this?
Really good question.
What Western Pennsylvania nonsense is this?
It was this farmhouse built for the movie, and there it is. You're welcome. That's why it doesn't have a root cellar interest. But yes, so they have this debate. I feel like at this point we're at Cooper locking himself down in the basement with his wife and his child. Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of everyone reading
there's
Mr.
the note
Cooper.
that the radio won't work down there,
right.
So we won't know what's happening. Tom and Judy end up picking the upstairs instead of the cellar, and Cooper closes the door behind him and locks it up. Although once he gets down there, his wife Helen reads him for filth. She is just like, oh, it was more important for you to be right huh? And you're just like, oh, it's one of these marriages. Oh, boy. Like, even later on, when she's like, hey, Judy, can you look after my daughter? She's all I have. It's just like, and your husband's mincemeat. Got it. Cool. Okay.
No, Helen is like, look, I know Ben's the real MVP. Helen's my sort of second in command of just like, wow. Like, damn, Cooper, you married up. And like she's, she reads him the riot act and like, they have this not argument, and I feel like he knows she's right, and then he lets slip that they have a radio upstairs, and she's just like, they have a radio? What are you doing? Like, why
we could have
here?
information, and instead you're sticking your head in the sand? Come on, man.
Anyway, even better than a radio, we have a TV. So then they bring the TV down. I love it. I love the TV. So then, now there's a whole section of the movie that's just the talking heads on TV portion.
Yes. Yep. Which I just say, I loved it so much because it's like the apocalypse happens. What are you going to do but sit there and watch the news?
Yeah, and we spent a lot of time with the talking heads on TV, though.
Sure
like,
do.
It actually surprised me how long we sit listening to the radio. And I actually, there was a great point made in that behind the scenes book I read of, they bring the TV down, as people are wont to do concerning the ubiquitous nerve-numbing news accounts from the latest Vietnam casualty stats, political assassinations, civil unrest, and other routine outrages of the era, Ben only half listens as he dutifully pursues more practical matters.
Yes.
Yep.
Very
it becomes
true.
this background noise. Mm-hmm. And you made, you were the one, Joy, as we were watching it, asking like, well, it kind of feels like a commentary about the reports that Americans were getting about the violence in Vietnam, among other things. And like, I think that's exactly what it feels like.
And that comment was actually kind of born out of, really it was born out of living through September 11th and having nothing to do but watch the news. Honestly, that was my experience with it, being like 18 and watching the towers fall, and then like 2 weeks of just watching the news and trying to figure out what's going on. And I just remember being like, and there's nothing else for me to do. Like, there's nothing more important right now than just sitting here and watching the news and trying to make sense of everything. And I just had that thought of like, what would have been the equivalent of a late 60s thing. I know the Vietnam War is complicated and has layers, but I just know a lot of American families would have experienced it through watching the news in their homes. And I don't know if it was the kind of thing that they just kind of sat there and were like, wow. But it just felt like the kind of thing that you would sit there and sort of feel helpless against it. And like, I do like that Ben is like, and then eventually it becomes, background noise. And he's like, well, this door isn't going to board up itself,
I know. There's still work to do. And then even more, there's the gas heist to plan.
The Molotov cocktails to make.
We find the key and we need to get that gas in the truck. And now we have a plan. I don't want to talk
about how stupid it ends, though. It's fine.
Okay,
we'll talk about it. No, it's fine.
But here we are. This is where we are.
That was
because
so painful.
It's still an apocalyptic story.
I know.
Even the best made plans will go awry.
Right.
It is necessary. It is a given.
Yeah.
Nobody's getting out of this alive.
Because Judy is too in love to let Tom do it himself, I guess.
Don't even blame this on Judy. It was Tom. It was Tom.
I know. Tom was the one.
Yes.
Like with the gas, like, hoses. How do they work?
I'm holding a gas pump and a flame. Maybe it's okay to let the streams cross. Come on, Tom.
No, this is Tom. This is all Tom.
Maybe, to be fair, maybe it is the ADD in me, but it's just like, he ruined the very carefully thought out habit plan I had in my head. And look, if you distract me from the easiest habit I will ever have, I'll do something dumb like leave my keys in the door because there was a package I wasn't expecting and suddenly my keys are in the door for like 24 hours and I don't remember why. Like, I'm just saying, maybe I'm projecting. But I do think Tom was thrown off by Judy running into that truck. I don't blame her for the whole thing, but I do blame the both of them for like, why? Why are we doing? Tom had a plan. He was going to stick to that plan, and then you messed it up.
It was a pretty well thought out plan. They even got Mr. Cooper in on it, which I was surprised by.
We had Coop we had Coop coming in on it. Like, Coop was throwing Molotovs out the upstairs window to, like, clear out the zombies, so they had a free getaway.
Had a job.
He didn't even want to go upstairs, and they got him to go upstairs. Ugh,
but then,
Tom.
But then panic happens. We get to the gas. We get the gas flowing, but Tom, I guess, doesn't know how to pump gas. He never had that job after school. Gas gets everywhere. The flames hit it. The fires are rising higher, going towards the truck. Judy gets stuck because her jacket's stuck. Tom,
that was really unfortunate.
Judy behind. And then, of course, the truck goes up in flame.
With them inside.
Really close to the barn.
Mm-hmm.
Super close to the barn. And Ben has to, with a torch, fight his way back towards the farmhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Which he does. And then Cooper, the dirty rat, locks the door. You dirty, dirty rat.
So that Ben is trapped outside the house and can't get back in.
How dare we?
And listen, Ben is able to kick the door in.
Yeah.
And is able to get inside.
The look on Ben's face when he busts in and then starts wailing on Cooper. Because he pretty much tried to kill Ben. This was murder, what he attempted.
Yeah, murder by zombie. You see this in other zombie stories also, where it's like people are just like, you're not moving fast enough, I'm going to leave you behind, or whatever it is,
it's so funny to me that, like, I could find quotes from Jones being like, I didn't want to punch the white woman, but there's nothing about, and then I beat the white guy. The white guy.
But
and it was so
Mr. Cooper
satisfying.
deserved this and so much more.
Yes, it's true.
Now, while this is happening, this is one of the few instances in this movie where we actually get to see the zombies eating human flesh.
Yes.
Yes.
The special effects on that are really spot on. Sorry, Nella.
So they got a whole bunch of prime cut, like, sausages and other meats and organ meats from, like, a local butcher. And, like, added some extra water to make it particularly gooey. And they were like, oh, man, these extras are really going hard on these organ meats.
Did they really have the extras, like, chew on livers and kidneys and what have you?
And they were like, they're really going into those organ meats. Yes. Yes.
Why?
Verisimilitude.
Right? Like, I think there's this moment of, like, you've gone too far. Like, there was not to derail us too much, but there used to be a show on TV called Fear Factor, I think, where there was, like, they eventually had to, like, stop doing certain things that involved blood and guts because they were like, some contestants went a little hard, and we didn't think that was appropriate to film.
Yeah.
They were like,
some of us got just a little bit too excited about eating what appears to be human meat.
Just a touch.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, then they watched the news again.
Well, like, I know after that it goes pretty fast because then, like, Cooper ends up shot, and then Helen gets killed by her daughter, who is reanimated.
Well, it's just more like they watched the news real quick just to show us the local militias that they've organized.
Yes.
Schrodinger's, Chekhov's a militia.
Chekhov's militia.
Yeah. When it all starts going to hell, like most things, it goes pretty fast.
Yeah.
It does. And, like, the inciting incident there is that the power lines go down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is when all chaos breaks loose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just people, like, the zombies start getting into the little nooks and crannies. Now there are too many zombies. There's not enough fire keeping them at bay. They're just coming in droves, and there's just too many of them. I believe this is around when Barbara gets dragged out the door.
Well, Barbara tries to help keep the door up. But as it breaks down, she sees Johnny.
Yep.
And actually, really interesting note, like the actor who played Johnny very specifically put driving gloves on his hands so that in this last scene, you would see the driving gloves and know it was him. Because he's like, no one's going to be able to pick my face out of a crowd. Like,
I definitely appreciate that this actor was like, sometimes I get cast as a generic guy. Let me just, like, have one thing to tell you who I am. And I definitely recognized those driving gloves because I was like, why are you wearing those?
That was smart.
And then in the finest of what will become zombie story tradition, Ben ends up in the spot he didn't want to end up anyway. He ends up in the cellar.
Yep. He ends up down in the cellar and like...
with a zombie child.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And those last few, like, clearing... You know, it's clearing the house at that point and making sure people don't come back. And it's, you know, like, these acts of violence... I don't even feel that way, right? Like, they feel like acts of mercy. Because it's like the shot off screen, you know, the shot into the shadow of, like, making sure the mom doesn't rise, making sure the kid is down.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just Ben.
And then we get to the last 10 minutes of the movie, which, how do we discuss? It's not even 10, but it felt like 10. There Ben is, trapped in the basement in the place that he didn't want to be. He mercy kills the Coopers. Let's just call it what it is, right?
Yeah.
And then he's basically in the clear, right? The zombie horde upstairs has been taken care of. The local militia is coming through. There are a few random zombies still kind of shambling around, and Ben figures, I can step upstairs and see what's going on.
Well, because he hears, like, the dogs barking.
Right.
You know, he hears something that isn't just shambling zombies upstairs.
And there, I suppose, was his fatal error.
Like, are they smelling the dead or are they just racist dogs? Who can say?
Exactly, because when you hear police and you hear police dogs, maybe don't go towards them.
So I find it really interesting that the filmmakers did consider an alternate ending that would permit Ben to survive. And it was Jones who was like, no, he has to die. The quote is, I convinced George that the black community would rather see me dead than saved after all that had gone on in a corny and symbolically confusing way. Besides, said Jones, the hero never die in American movies. The jolt of that and the double jolt of the hero figure being black seemed like a double-barreled whammy.
Yeah, I think it was the decision that made the most sense because I don't see any world in which Ben stepped out of that house and was not shot.
Yeah.
Like,
And he doesn't
I don't see a world where that didn't happen.
He doesn't even get to step out of the house.
Yeah.
He is peering through the boarded up window and he gets headshotted.
Yep. Yep.
Acting in a way that no other zombie has acted, right? Like,
Right? And they still shoot him.
Yeah. No, I mean, going back to what I was saying earlier, I think the only thing that would have saved Ben was getting in that truck.
Getting out.
Yeah. Not staying until the end of the film.
Yeah. Well, you know, I remember the first time we saw it and like having that moment of Ben getting shot just like sucks everything out of you.
Yeah.
Oh no, all the air
really
all the air in the
does.
room goes completely out the window.
And then there are those interspersed scenes with the credits.
Oh, the photo montage at the end that so disturbingly mirrors lynching photos is it's you know, as much as they say they, you know, we didn't really think about what we were doing at the time we were doing it, like that closing montage is like, and then you got the memo and then you realized what you'd made, and you decided to end on those photos because that's the only explanation I can think of that makes sense.
Yeah, it's so it mirrors so closely. There's like you said, there's no other way to not know what you were doing.
Yeah. Like maybe you know, you can still have this movie playing the whole way, having this black actor playing a part that wasn't technically written for a black actor, but the ending just, again, like, even if that was the end, and it was the ending that was originally planned, like no one was getting out of this house alive, but the weight it carries because of the actor,
and because of the way it was shot.
Oh no, those still photos I think really saved. I think it's sort of saved the ending. You know, like in the, I mean, I know, you know, the floored prose of like, yes, the air goes out of the room. The complicatedness of, you know, Ben dying like under different circumstances of like a black man being killed by a mob. And like the public would have seen it in still photos and articles and things like that. And I just think it mirrors it so closely. And it's like so important to have that cinematography do that at that time. And that's why the air goes out of the room. Because it's like, well, these are the images that you see as a population. Like,
and those are images that people would have recognized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Verbatim. There are no words. Ver-photo.
Ver-photo.
Yeah. So before we move on to the next one, I do want to end on this lighter note of so the posse member, the actor who played the posse member that actually shoots Ben, didn't know that that's what he was shooting in the scene.
Oh, no.
So he's quoted as saying, "I shot the hero without knowing it. I didn't know what I was shooting in that scene until I saw the picture."
Oh, no.
The first time I saw it with an audience of kids at a matinee, I was afraid to leave the theater.
No.
I waited until they all left and snuck out the back door.
Well, that's very true to the experience of the character in the film.
I mean,
You're not wrong. It's not like he didn't know what he was shooting either.
It's just like, hi, it's I played the part of the posse member who shot the hero in Night of the Living Dead. I didn't know it at the time, but that's me.
Like, I just love that it's like a full-on Kaiser Sose ending, where like even as they were filming Usual Suspects, people didn't like. Gabriel Byrne thought he was the bad guy all the way up until he saw it in theaters and went, "Wait a minute." Like, I love that. That's great. Oh no.
Yeah. So
poor
there we
actor.
are.
Now turn the record over, and we will continue on the other side.